For years, we've been told by the government and the media that the United States, NATO, and their allies must fight a global war on terror.
Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists.
Terrorism, a group of terrorists, our systematic effort to dismantle terrorist organizations must continue.
The terrorists and extremists.
Radical Islamic terrorism.
In this report, we will document how the war on terror is a false pretext to justify undeclared wars on sovereign nations. We will establish how the U.S., NATO, and their allies are covertly arming the same terrorist groups that we are allegedly fighting. And you will see how the media is corrupt and complicit in suppressing this information and is only there to promote their wars, as they are the propaganda arm of the deep state. In February of 2017, investigative reporter Dilyana Gaytandzhieva authored a bombshell report for Trude newspaper, based in Belgium, which found that an Azerbaijan state airline company named Silkway Airlines was regularly transporting tons of weaponry to Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Turkey under diplomatic cover as part of the CIA covert program to arm anti-Assad fighters in Syria. Gaytandzhieva found those weapons ended up in the hands of ISIS and Al Qaeda terrorists in Iraq and Syria. While it has been known for some time that the US, NATO, and their allies have been arming terrorists, this investigative report reveals previously unknown extensive documentation detailing the precise logistical chain of the weapons as they flowed from their country of origin into the battlefields of Syria and Iraq. The Bulgaria-based journalist obtained and published dozens of secret internal memos, which were leaked to her by an anonymous source as part of her report. I spoke to freelance journalist Aaron Kessler, who had previously reported on the leaks.
This leak, which is actually a total of 50 gigabytes now, when I wrote it up, it was only 10 gigabytes. This leak actually shows that Silkway Airlines helped terrorists by being a distributor for weapons and chemical weapons. They gave chemical weapons to terrorists within the Middle East to destabilize the Middle East. This is direct evidence that all these countries are involved in geopolitical moves in the Middle East for their own gain. What's really interesting about this leak is that the U.S. companies were connected, which makes me think that the CIA has involvement in this. And if we go back to the Panama Papers years ago, it came out that the CIA was using offshore Panama banks to fund weapon smuggling operations. This evidence here is further evidence that the U.S. has had a long-standing policy within the Middle East to destabilize the Middle East.
The leaked documents show internal communications between the Bulgarian government and Azerbaijan's embassy in Sofia, detailing flight plans for Silkway Airlines, which was essentially operating an off-the-books weapons transport service under the cover of diplomatic immunity, rendering the contents of the shipments immune to any regulations or inspections. These shipments were for the U.S. Special Operations Command, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. The CIA has been known to farm out legally questionable activities to private contractors for the sake of plausible deniability. So it's not surprising to also find the names of private American companies contracting with the U.S. government like Purple Shovel, who had 2 no-bid contracts with the U.S. government for $50 million to help train and equip militants in Syria, listed in the leaked documents in connection with the weapons transports by Silkway Airlines. This report is being blacked out by the media, and just days ago, the investigative reporter was interrogated by the Bulgarian security services, but they weren't asking about who was trafficking the weapons to support international terrorists. They were grilling her about her sources, wanting to know who gave her those documents. Immediately following the government interrogation, she was fired. Newsbud was able to secure an interview with the persecuted journalist, which we will showcase in full here in this presentation. But for now, here are a few highlights. Now, Dilyana, tell me about the documents you referenced in your report. How did you obtain them, and what did they say?
In the beginning, I will start with a short explanation. In December of last year, I was reporting on the Battle of Aleppo. When the jihadists from the Al Qaeda affiliate Al Nusra Front retreated from their positions, I got inside 9 underground warehouses full of heavy weapons with Bulgaria as their country of origin. When I got back to my home country, I traced back the way these weapon supplies made it to terrorists in Syria, and it turned out that these weapon supplies are just a small portion of a bigger international scheme.
You told us a little bit about how you were questioned by the Bulgarian security services. Can you provide some examples of some of the questions that they were asking you?
I had a few days ago, I had a phone call from a special agent working for the Bulgarian National Security Agency. I want to stress that I didn't get a subpoena or other notice that I would be interrogated. I just had a phone call, and I was asked to go to the office of the Bulgarian National Security Agency, and when I got there, I was interrogated about the source of the documents, my source of information. I wasn't interrogated about the content of the information that I provided publicly.
Stay tuned for the full interview. This is a very important piece of the story, but it's just one aspect of a much larger story. Sibel Edmonds of Newsbud has been exposing the role of Azerbaijan and Bulgaria in Operation Gladio B, from arms trafficking to heroin transport operations for 15 years.
I began exposing Azerbaijan's role as a major Operation Gladio B hub starting in 2003-2004. As a NATO candidate member and a strategically positioned member of Operation Gladio, starting in 1997, Azerbaijan took over from Turkey as a major hub for weapons trafficking and heroin to and from Afghanistan and the Balkans. Despite all my attempts, my efforts to expose Azerbaijan and the main players of these nefarious operations, from CIA-NATO operatives to well-known U.S. officials such as Richard Pearl, Douglas Feet, and Mark Grossman, the mainstream and pseudo-alternatives have maintained their success in blacking out and censoring these revelations.
Now remember, Bulgaria is a NATO member, and Azerbaijan has been supporting NATO for decades. Sibel Edmonds covers this in her latest exclusive article for Newsbud titled NATO CIA Pentagon, Junction of the Real Drug Lords and Warlords. Sibel also specifically covers this in a 2013 article where she writes, Azerbaijan is a major transit link of trafficking in heroin and other drugs transported from Afghanistan to Europe. And this is according to a major UN body, the UN Office of Drugs and Crimes. Says the so-called Northern Balkan route, a relatively recent variant on the Balkan route, which transits the Caucasus rather than Turkey and crosses Azerbaijan. Now keep in mind, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Bulgaria happen to be major NATO fields of operations. In fact, the importance of the Balkans as the major transit hub has been established since the late 1990s. Edmonds continues to document the United States praising the role of Azerbaijan in the international efforts for provision of security in Afghanistan, citing a speech from the commander of the Transport Command of the United States, General William Fraser, who spoke at hearings in the U.S. Congress and said the successful direct transportation of cargo via the airspace of Azerbaijan represents special importance in this context. Before that, Azerbaijani Deputy Foreign Minister Araz Azimov announced that Azerbaijan is a transit on the way of cargo transportation to Afghanistan, and our country provides different services within the framework of the ISAF operation held by NATO. According to him, these cargoes will return from Afghanistan to Europe and other countries via Azerbaijan. Now let's add up the dots at this point. Number 1, after the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan and under U.S. NATO control, heroin production and sales boom through the roof. 2, Azerbaijan has become one of the most strategically important heroin transport hubs since the beginning of Operation Gladio B, and since it has joined and come under NATO as a candidate member. Number 3, just like Turkey, nations with airfields under U.S. command such as Kyrgyzstan's Manis Air Base and Azerbaijan's NATO airfields, they have become the most important transportation hubs for heroin. And here's another report, Sibel Edmonds, Azerbaijan, revelations blocked by the Department of Justice via censoring the Sunday Times. Now, in her book, Classified Woman, Sibel Edmonds, a former translator for the FBI, describes how the Pentagon, the CIA, and the State Department maintained intimate ties to Al Qaeda militants as late as 2001. Edmonds implicates senior government officials with negligence, corruption, and collaboration with Al Qaeda in illegal arms smuggling and drug trafficking in Central Asia. In interviews with the author in early March, Edmonds claimed that Ayman al-Zawahiri, the current head of Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden's deputy at the time, had innumerable regular meetings at the U.S. Embassy in Baku, Azerbaijan, with U.S. military and intelligence officials between 1997 and 2001, as part of an operation known as Gladio B. Al-Zawahiri, as well as various members of the bin Laden family and other mujahideen, were transported on NATO planes to various parts of Central Asia and the Balkans to participate in Pentagon-backed destabilization operations. According to 2 Sunday Times journalists speaking on condition of anonymity, this and related revelations have been confirmed by senior Pentagon and MI6 officials as part of a 4-part investigative series that was supposed to run in 2008. The Sunday Times journalists described how the story was inexplicably dropped under pressure of undisclosed interest groups, which they suggest were associated with the U.S. State Department. Folks, the major UK publication, the Sunday Times, was told by the State Department and MI6 not to publish this information.
You fast forward, look at Azerbaijan. Since 1996, Azerbaijan been the closest ally of United States and NATO. In fact, they are becoming a NATO member. For the last 8 years, NATO has been there with the base, training them. They've been passing the tests. They went from purchasing something like $25 million weapons worth of weapons from the United States today to something like $4 billion of U.S. weapons. So success. Gladio was successful.
FBI whistleblower and Newsbud founder Sibel Edmonds has been exposing the FBI's counterintelligence operations against Gladio's network that had contacts and operatives in the United States, but also had protection from powerful Washington players, like some of those on the board of the U.S. Azerbaijani Chamber of Commerce, where you will find people like Farhad Azima. Azima is a man known for being a major financial backer of the Clintons and would regularly have the Clintons over as guests in his home. Azima also visited the Clinton White House 10 times in a 14-month period, which included private sessions with President Clinton. Azima currently lives in Missouri and is a big-time player in the aviation cargo transport industry, especially in, you guessed it, Azerbaijan. Farhad Azima is a known arms trafficker and has been linked to the CIA and the Iran-Contra scandal and is currently being investigated by the FBI for a United Arab Emirates arms deal.
And in 2015, this document obtained by AP indicates he formed a company called Denks LLC with 2 partners said to be former CIA operatives and the journalist Jay Solomon.
But I suspect this investigation will end up like all of the previous ones. As stated in this AP article, the probe hit a dead end. Azima, a U.S. citizen, essentially had a stay-out-of-jail-free card because of secretive work he had performed for the U.S. government, a former federal prosecutor involved in the case said. Azima, a gun runner, later tied to the CIA in the Iran-Contra scandal of the Reagan administration, was never prosecuted. Azima is not the only person of interest in regards to the U.S. Azerbaijani Chamber of Commerce. When you look at the current and former advisors, directors, and board members, you will find some of the richest and most powerful people in the realm of geopolitics, including former Vice President Dick Cheney, former Secretary of State and Bush advisor James Baker III, Henry Kissinger, Brent Scowcroft, Richard Armitage of the State Department, Richard Pearl, and Zbigniew Brzezinski. Now, why would all of these men, and many others that are not mentioned be members of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for the tiny little insignificant country of Azerbaijan? Well, it's because Azerbaijan is a main hub of operations for Gladio B, especially in regards to the covert trafficking of the drug and arms trade, which is currently being run by CIA, NATO, and other closely related intelligence agencies. As you can see, this is a major operation that consists of arms going in and drugs going out. It is extremely interesting to note the PNAC signatories that overlap with the U.S.-Azerbaijan Chamber of Commerce, like Dick Cheney, Richard Armitage, and Richard Pearl. It begins to paint a very colorful picture, especially when you take into account stories like this. Israel signs $1.6 billion arms deal with Azerbaijan, and Israel, Azerbaijan united by arms trade and respect. Or perhaps this is best laid out in a Basplier exclusive analysis for Newsbud on Israel's interests in Syria. As you can see, there are many groups that are covertly trying to influence Syria and the Middle East through these back channels. So now let's hear from the persecuted investigative journalist who exposed the covert arming of terrorists by the groups we just covered. Joining us today, we have Dilyana Gaytandzhieva, who is an investigative journalist with 15 years of experience. She has done investigative reporting from Libya and Syria and recently exposed a massive covert weapons shipment network to terrorist groups in Syria via diplomatic flights carried out by Silkway Airlines originating in Azerbaijan under the watch of the CIA and other intelligence agencies. Now, this information has been suppressed by the media, and since breaking this story, you have been interrogated and fired from your job, as I understand it. Now, Dilyana, tell me about the documents you referenced in your report. How did you obtain them, and what did they say?
In the beginning, I will start with a short explanation. In December of last year, I was reporting on the Battle of Aleppo, when the jihadists from the Al Qaeda affiliate Al Nusra Front retreated from their positions. I got inside 9 underground warehouses full of heavy weapons with Bulgaria as their country of origin. When I got back to my home country, I traced back the way these weapon supplies made it to terrorists in Syria, and it turned out that these weapon supplies are just a small portion of a bigger international scheme. After my first report, I was contacted by an anonymous Twitter account, and the user, whom I don't know, I want to stress, I don't know who was behind this Twitter account, sent me scandalous documents. I opened the documents and I was shocked by the gravity of and the dimensions of this criminal scheme. I inspected the documents. It turned out that their official communication between the embassy of Azerbaijan to Bulgaria and the Bulgarian authorities, plus many other secret documents implicating the Azeri state-run company Silkway Airlines in a global weapons supply around the world. And after confirming the authenticity of these documents, I published my investigation. Later on, the Azeri embassy to Bulgaria also confirmed that the embassy and the computer network of the embassy was subject to a cyber attack, and they urged the Bulgarian authorities to investigate the issue, and they did investigate the issue. I was interrogated by the Bulgarian National Security Agency, and a few hours later, my contract with the newspaper where I used to work was suspended, and this happened just a few days before I was about to go to Syria to continue my job on the ground, to investigate the issue on the ground. And for me, it wasn't a surprise because, in my opinion, the Bulgarian authorities didn't want me to continue my investigation on the ground in Syria. They have lots to hide, not only the Bulgarian authorities, but the authorities of a number of Eastern European countries and many other countries around the world.
Well, Dilyana, that is explosive information, without a doubt. I'm not surprised that you were shocked upon opening those documents and reading them. Now, you told us a little bit about how you were questioned by the Bulgarian security services. Can you provide some examples of some of the questions that they were asking you?
I had, a few days ago, I had a phone call from a special agent working for the Bulgarian National Security Agency. I want to stress that I didn't get a subpoena or other notice that I would be interrogated. I just had a phone call and I was asked to go to the office of the Bulgarian National Security Agency, and when I got there, I was interrogated about the source of the documents, my source of information. I wasn't interrogated about the content of the information that I provided publicly. I was questioned about my sources. By law, I'm not obliged to share this information, and of course, I will always protect my sources. By the way, I was very honest and very straightforward with the public, sharing that this information was sent to me via an anonymous Twitter account, and I'm very thankful to those people behind this account because thanks to them, this information, which is important for the whole world, is now public. It is released and it is available for all the people around the world so that they know what their governments are doing. Because even now when we are talking, I'm sure, because I checked, the diplomatic flights continue, and at the very moment when we are talking now, I'm sure that a rocket hits and kills civilians, and I appeal to all your viewers to share this information so that we can all together press the governments of all the countries involved to stop these weapon supplies and to investigate the issue.
Absolutely. We definitely echo those words. We definitely agree with that sentiment that accountability is necessary, without a doubt. Now, in your own words, why is this such a big deal? Why would the authorities be so interested in questioning you about your sources rather than the information about the actual trafficking itself?
I checked the legislation, and it turned out, not only in Bulgaria, everywhere, that every license which is issued to a private company or state-run company, no matter, to export weapons, it is supervised by the secret services of every country. So the Bulgarian secret services are well aware about these weapons supplies, this flow of weapons to Syria in the case of Bulgaria, because I saw myself on the ground 122 millimeter Grad rockets, and I saw myself on the ground in Syria. One of these rockets fell next to us and killed and beheaded a mother and her child before my eyes. Saying that I can prove it because I filmed a lot of footage, and nobody from the Bulgarian authorities or even the Bulgarian prosecutors who also launched investigation into the leaked documents, nobody even asked me about providing this footage, which is a clear evidence that Bulgarian weapons, Eastern European weapons, via Saudi Arabia reached terrorists. So my guess is that the secret services of many countries are well aware, and not only well aware, they facilitate the traffic of weapons, not only in Syria, but also in Yemen, in Pakistan, in Congo, in different countries from the region of South Africa. Now we are all looking forward to the end of the war in Syria. Where will these jihadists go after the end of the war in Syria? Probably this will be Afghanistan and Pakistan. Also, we have war zones in South Africa, in the area of South Africa. So this flow of weapons and this criminal scheme via diplomatic flights will continue, and we all must make this issue public, because this is the way how our governments, not only the Bulgarian but also the Serbian, the Romanian, the Croatian government, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and the United States should know that they will be held accountable by the voters, because all this money, this is the taxpayer money, and our government facilitates the jihadists with our money. Not only the aid for the jihadists, this costs the life of hundreds of thousands of people. Only in Syria, more than 500,000 people have already been killed. This must stop. This must stop, and I'm very thankful to you for giving me the opportunity to speak up.
Well, we thank you for your bravery for exposing this and coming on our show and helping to share this information to help inform people of what we've suspected all along. Your reports now document this with hard proof, documented facts that this is taking place. And you're absolutely right about our tax dollars are going to fund these illegal operations and illegal wars that are killing innocent people. So yes, in a sense, the blood, in a sense, comes on our hands too. So that's why it's very important for people to hold their representatives accountable, hold their governments accountable. Now, how any of the other mainstream media outlets or some of the well-funded so-called alternative outlets such as Democracy Now! Or The Intercept, or even the Young Turks, who just got a $20 million investment deal, contacted you for an interview about this, because this is documented proof that the CIA, that NATO, that other government intelligence agencies are covertly arming terrorists like ISIS in Syria to overthrow democratically elected governments. I mean, this is a big deal. This is huge.
I have not been contacted by any mainstream media outlet so far. I have no explanation as to why mainstream media, who pretends to speak freely and fight for democracy, are not interested in the killing of civilians by weapons coming from Europe, because these weapons there come from Europe via Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and the United States, under secret programs, sent weapons to the jihadists. And because I've been covering this war in Syria almost since its beginning, and I can assure you that since 2013, there was no such thing as the Free Syrian Army or moderate opposition in Syria. I interviewed the deputy commander of the Free Syrian Army, Colonel Malik Al-Kurdi, and he was very straightforward in this interview, and he said something very scandalous, which later on turned out to be true by the documents that I published, that the secret services of 15 foreign countries facilitate and arms Al Qaeda. He talked about Al Qaeda, meaning the al-Nusra Front, represented as the moderate opposition in Syria. And he said that the Free Syrian Army is just used as a pretext for these secret services to justify the military aid that they send to jihadists in Syria. And this is not what I claim. This is what the so-called moderate opposition, which is not in Syria, it is in Turkey. And I took and I interviewed Malik Al-Kurdi in Turkey in the province of Hatay, which is located on the border with Syria, but from the Turkish part of the border, not in Syria. So the Free Syrian Army doesn't exist in Syria, or the moderate opposition, and this is not something new. Actually, this is the issue since 2014, and I can prove it with this interview.
Well, lots of great information here. I'm sure we would like to have you on again in the future. I have a couple more questions for you here before I don't want to take up too much of your time. Now, do you feel you were fired for your reporting on all of this?
Absolutely, because just a few weeks ago I had a conversation with my editor-in-chief, and he claimed that the newspaper was fully behind me, that I would have their full support to continue my investigation, and I was about to go to Syria. So all of a sudden, just a few hours after my interrogation by the Bulgarian National Security Agency about my sources, and after I refused to cooperate with them, I got fired without explanation. So I'm sure that the Bulgarian authorities pressurized the newspaper just to suspend my contract, because it's inconvenient for them to have a journalist in Bulgaria who will speak up, and it's a local issue, but I'm sure it is the same in many countries around the world. There is no such thing as freedom of speech. All the mainstream media just pretend to be free, but they defend the official government's agenda, or the corporate agenda as well. They defend those who pay money.
Well, that was going to be, yes, you covered a couple points there, already answering some of the questions before I could even ask them about, yes, you believe that the government influenced the decision to fire you, and clearly it certainly looks that way. So what does this say about the freedom of the press at this point?
It's very sad, and talking about my country, I didn't have any support by my colleagues. This is the sad thing. They are afraid to support me, even on social media, because they will be punished like I was punished. Thankfully, now we have social media, so this information can't be hidden anymore, and everybody can access this information, so that our governments should know that they can't shut our mouths up when they fire us or punish us in any way. There's other sources of information that are public, that are in the public domain, and that are available to the voters. And this is our job, no matter where we work. Your media organization is such an example. People should not know the truth, and we should make this information available to them.
Absolutely. Now, Dilyana, are you concerned for your safety at all, or the safety of the anonymous leaker?
I'm not concerned about my safety, because to be honest, here in my country, this is not the way they punish journalists. I'm more concerned about the safety of all these people that I mentioned in Syria, in Yemen, in Congo, in Pakistan. They are the real victims. It is often said that the first victim of every war, this is the truth. And this is our mission, mine and yours, to save the truth. This is our calling as journalists.
Well said. Now, I want to thank you very much for your time and taking this interview on such short notice. What is the best place for people to find you and your work?
On Twitter. This is where they can contact me anytime. I will gladly answer.
Okay, great. Well, we will include that in the show notes below. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated. You're a great media organization, and I can assure all of your viewers that you are absolutely independent and free.
I'd like to thank Dilyana for her time and for her courageous reporting. Here's a special message from Newsbud's founder, Sibel Edmonds.
When I started BFB, Newsbud's predecessor, one of my main objectives was to make the propaganda tentacles of the deep state, the mainstream and pseudo-alternative media outlets, irrelevant. My motto was, and is, let's become our own media, a news and analysis organization where there are zero ties to megacorporations, foundation sugar daddies, or partisan operatives. And that's exactly what we have created here at Newsbud. I'm proud of Dilyana, a real investigative journalist, and Newsbud, an independent and diligent medium to highlight her investigative work and inexcusable firing for engaging in real journalism. There is so much to investigate and expose in this case. This is just the beginning. With your support and subscriptions, we will be doing just that. Please do your share and help us, Newsbud, make the deep state propaganda channels irrelevant.
Newsbud is 100% people funded. We do not receive any money from any advertisers, corporations, foundations, or governments. We are solely funded through your subscriptions and donations. As you can see, the mainstream media and the pseudo-alternative media with multi-million-dollar budgets are not taking on these extremely important topics. They are not exposing the deep state or Operation Gladio B. Sibel Edmonds is the one who put Operation Gladio B on the map through her relentless pursuit of truth and justice. This is why your support is needed not only to maintain our current operations, but also to expand so we can continue to investigate and report the stories that our compromised competitors simply will not cover. Stay tuned for more. As Sibel mentioned, this is only the beginning, and there's a lot more to cover. Proudly reporting for Newsbud, I'm Spiro.